Hello. In this lecture, we will discuss how reading disabilities are defined and the different models for identification of reading disabilities and the concerns or problems connected with them. In education, disability identification and services are dictated by federal law, IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA was last reauthorized in 2004. There is talk that it will be reauthorized again soon. It is past due. IDEA federal law requires states to create operating standards around how they will implement federal law, so things do vary by state. A child with a disability means a child evaluated in accordance with Section 300.304 through 300.311 as having one of the disabilities listed above and who, by reason thereof, needs special education and related services. I added the bold. Each disability has specific evaluation criteria outlined in the law. This provision includes the very important phrase, and who, by reason thereof, needs special education services. This means that because of the disability, the child needs special education and related services. Their disability is directly and significantly impacting their educational achievement. Many children may have a disability, but it is not showing significant impact on their achievement, such that specialized services are needed. If a child has a disability, but is not eligible under IDEA, he or she may be eligible for protections afforded by the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Classification under IDEA for special education brings with it funds to provide services, as most of you likely know. 504 plans do not bring money to provide services. IDEA outlines 14 disability categories. Reading disabilities fall under the category Specific Learning Disability, SLD. SLD is a broad category that is defined as a child who does not achieve adequately for their age or grade in one or more of the following academic areas. On the next slide. When they have been provided with scientifically based instruction appropriate for the child's age or grade. The 8 SLD categories are oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, reading fluency skills, reading comprehension, mathematics calculations, and mathematics problem solving. In order to qualify as a child with a specific learning disability, your lack of progress and achievement must not be related to visual, hearing, or motor disabilities, mental retardation, emotional disturbance, or environmental, cultural, or economic disadvantage. Limited English proficiency as well. This does not mean that English language learners can't be identified as SLD, just that the reason for their low achievement in an academic area is not due to limited English. The challenge would also need to be seen in their native proficient language. IDEA required that states adopt criteria for determining whether a child has a specific learning disability. The criteria adopted by the state must not require the use of a severe discrepancy between intellectual ability and achievement. We'll talk more about this in a moment. They must permit the use of a process based on the child's response to scientific research-based intervention, and may permit the use of other alternative research-based procedures for determining whether a child has a specific learning disability. SLD can be thought of on a continuum, like most human behaviors. If we were to look at a student's score on a norm reference test, a test that has been normed for different grades and ages to understand the typical and atypical scores, a child's specific score is compared to a normed group. They would fall into a bell curve. In norm reference testing, most scores fall between plus or minus 1 standard deviation, and most NRTs set the average at 100 with a standard deviation of 15. So the typical average range is 85 to 115. Extreme scores on the right are children who are doing exceptionally well on the measure, and those on the left are doing exceptionally poorly on the measure. So, this is a test, if this is a test of reading, this would be a gifted reader, and this would be a child with a reading disability. But what about this child? Right on the edge of low average. The challenge and the criticism of the SLD category is, where do you draw the line between disability and non-disability? Everyone agrees it is outside the average range, but 1 standard deviation, 1.5, 2? It is important not just to look at a test score to understand disability, but to focus on the instructional response and the instructional needs. The traditional way of deciding if a child has a learning disability was to give them a battery of norm reference tests and to see if there was a discrepancy between their cognitive abilities, as measured by IQ, and an area of academic achievement, as measured by a norm referenced achievement test. This is the discrepancy formula that has since been disproven but is still widely used in SLD evaluations. Let's look at 2 examples to understand the practical implications and concerns. From this slide, you see the testing results for child number 1. For all of these norm reference tests, the average range is 85 and 115, with 100 being the mean. So for this child, you see her IQ is 105, and her achievement results are all within the average range except her reading and written expression. The idea behind the discrepancy formula is a child is underperforming in a specific achievement area based on their IQ. Their IQ shows that they are in the average range, so one would assume that all achievement areas would at least be in the average range. Significant discrepancy between achievement and IQ is typically defined as a 2 standard deviation difference between IQ and achievement. In the case of this set of tests, 1 standard deviation is 15, and so 2 standard deviations would be 30. So for a significant discrepancy, we are looking for a 30-point difference between the IQ, 105, and one of the areas of achievement. And for this child, this is easily seen in the area of reading. She has a reading standard score of 75 and an IQ score of 105, so she would be classified as having a learning disability in reading. Okay, so it looks like the discrepancy formula works and makes sense. This child clearly needs support in reading. Because of this, we can understand lower written expression and spelling concerns that aren't in that discrepancy range but are close. Now let's look at child 2. The child has an IQ in the normal range with a score of 90. It is at the lower end of the average range, but still within the average range. This child's achievement scores are all below the average range. When you look at child 2, from these test results, it is clear that this child has significant concerns across academic areas. However, this child does not have a 30-point discrepancy between IQ and achievement. And so this child would not qualify for learning disability under the discrepancy formula, and thus would not qualify for special education services. Yet, I think everyone would agree when looking at these 2 children, child 2 clearly has more significant needs for intervention and remediation. When I was working as a psychologist in inner city schools, I saw many children like child number 2, and it was heartbreaking when they could not receive services under this way of looking at eligibility. There has been an outcry from many professionals and researchers to do away with this formula when looking at SLD. There are many problems with the achievement discrepancy formula. This example points out a big problem. It excludes children who likely need special education supports. Another big reason is the role of IQ in SLD determination at all. For reading, the effective IQ changes across development. As Moats notes in Chapter 1 of our text for this class, quote, "The correlation and causal effects of verbal intelligence on reading achievement changes as reading develops. IQ scores and verbal reasoning ability do not predict reading success in the beginning stages, as well as phonological and decoding skills do." That can be found on page 14. IQ is not needed in an evaluation for reading disability or any specific learning disability. As Seidenberg notes, quote, IQ is not a strong predictor of intervention response or long-term outcomes. Patterns of brain activity for higher and lower IQ poor readers are nearly indistinguishable, and both differ from those seen in good readers. The primary question is about children's reading, whether it is below age expected levels, not their intelligence. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, also outlines criteria for SLD. This diagnostic guide is not used in schools, but it is important to know about as it is used in private evaluations by psychologists and psychiatrists to diagnose disabilities. Schools often receive evaluations where the DSM is cited. It also discourages the use of the discrepancy model. SLD federal law and IDEA, and also in the DSM-5, both note that children with specific learning disabilities fall below age or grade level peers. There are evaluation criteria, but exact cut scores are not listed. This is left up to states to provide guidance on, in the case of IDEA, and individual clinicians or diagnostic teams. It is typically agreed that 1.5 to 2 standard deviations below the mean on skills connected to the disability category is considered significantly low to justify a disability, along with data about a child's response to evidence-based intervention. More on this later. IDEA moved SLD identification away from the previously used disproven cognitive discrepancy formula towards a focus on instructional discrepancy. A child who otherwise was healthy and lacking of other disability concerns, see the exclusion criteria, was not making adequate progress in a given academic area, for example, reading, despite strong research-based instruction. Unexpected underachievement was due to a specific concern or disability in the area of academics. For example, something about reading was unexpectedly difficult, and thus specialized instruction is needed. Instruction that is targeted to the student's needs and of an intense enough nature that he or she can make progress. As you read about in Mikiak and Fletcher, 2020 article, and Seidenberg, an MTSS or RTI model should be used to identify dyslexia and other learning disabilities. The response to intervention model evolved into what is now called the multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. The two terms are used interchangeably. RTI/MTSS has been conceptualized in a number of different forms and pictures, and the 3 or sometimes even 4 parts are called tiers or levels. But across all of these different conceptualizations, there are a number of core components that hold true. This model is about providing effective instruction for all. As discussed in the readings, it is not perfect as it can be challenging to implement. With strong implementation, it can raise the reading achievement of all children and help identify and support those who need significant academic or behavioral support. In an RTI-MTSS model, strong core instruction is provided to all children, and then a system of increasingly intense intervention supports is provided based on need. We will talk about this model more in the next lecture.